So it turns out it's very, very hard to turn an office building into an apartment building. And some of the practical problems are plumbing. So think about your average office building. It's got one restroom, two restrooms, three restrooms. And then when it's time to put in apartments, like everyone wants a restroom. So, like that's a big problem. There are a lot of interior spaces that might not have windows, which is a no-no for a lot of apartments. Kitchens, the same jam.
Elevators. The elevators are often not built to the same specifications that are required for residential building. You've got a lot of building code problems for residential conversions. It's just not happening. I mean, and then on top of it, you'd need a lot of zoning changes, and in New York, you'd need some state law changes. It's residential office conversion is really, really, really hard. It was okay in some of the older buildings downtown in New York. So in the financial districts, those buildings were built differently than modern office buildings. But, it's really hard to see residential conversions. A lot of the buildings, if they're going to become residential, are going to have to be knocked down.
Yeah, and then at that point, it's not much of a conversion. You're like knocking it down. You're like, hey, let's build an apartment building.
Yeah.
I have been in the downtown office buildings that have been converted, and some of them are very nice, but they're still also funky. Like all the dimensions are funky.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's you can see people sometimes like funky, like it's like lofts or whatever. They have a little bit of that feel to them. It's like a unique space, but it's not going to be a massive source of housing, particularly because the state and city are going to require, if they ever do allow this, are going to require a good amount of the apartments that are created to be deed restricted affordable. Or rent restricted, and the result will be that the economics of it doesn't work out, even if you can overcome some of the building code changes. And so I don't think there's any realistic opportunities for residential conversions, particularly in New York, in the short or medium term, unless the politics changes pretty substantially.
Yeah, and you mentioned San Francisco, which has these problems revved up even higher, perhaps. I mean, there are very large office buildings. You're saying that their occupancy is lower than 50%, which wouldn't surprise you.
Oh, it's much lower. Yeah, San Francisco is the lowest of any downtown in the country.
So is that like 20, 25?
Yeah, something like that. I don't have the number in my hand, but it's really low.
And what's interesting is both New York and San Francisco, these buildings were premium priced before. I mean, they could command crazy rents, and then now they can't rent it for any level.
It's unclear whether they can rent it for any level. So there's been the price discovery has been slow in this area, and there's some reasons you might imagine. Something about their contracts, the things that there's been some lack of desire to take losses, which may affect the banks, and there's a couple of things going on. But it has been whether they're permanently useless or temporarily useless, or just in some kind of stasis due to some kind of difficulty working out contracts is a little hard to say.
You're right, is in that we don't know what the correct price level is. And there are a lot of incentives in place for them not to rent something for a song, because then everyone else in the building is like, wait, what? They're getting it for a song? And then your creditors are like, wait, what? You're renting it for that level? If you rent it at that level, you can never pay us back. And so there are a lot of folks who are probably frozen in place.
Yeah, the problem is in some ways pretty similar to the problem we've seen in New York for a while about retail vacancies, which is like retail space is really expensive in New York. Why was it the case that there were so many retail vacancies even before COVID? And the answer was there were a lot of difficulties with contracts and pricing in the way that you describe, and so we might need legal interventions of other sorts to encourage the market to shake out a little better.
Yeah, the average retail lease is probably something like 4 or 5 years, and a lot of folks aren't able to make that kind of commitment.
This will have some effect on commercial property tax revenue going forward, which will be a big problem. And places like New York are obviously very dependent on commercial property taxes, but so are almost all downtowns. And you're seeing, differential problems across jurisdictions. Office uptake in southern jurisdictions is much higher than it is in New York and San Francisco, but it's a problem everywhere. That you're seeing decline in commercial property values, and that is particularly a fiscal problem because they're generally taxed at higher rates.
Hey YouTube, glad you're enjoying the podcast. If you really like it, hit subscribe, and then YouTube will notify you every time we have a bang up new guest. Thank you.